This boy went to take the adventurer exam. On the written test, he got everything wrong. Absolutely everything. The evaluators looked at the paper and laughed. Just another clueless country boy. On the practical test, they threw everyone into a forest. Archers, mercenaries, experienced warriors. Each one went after what they knew how to do. The boy came back dragging an entire red bear across the ground. Not the claw, not the bile sac, the whole animal, because he didn't know how to extract just the part he needed. The other candidates who were in the forest said they saw him draw his sword, and in an instant the bear dropped. Nobody saw the strike. The room went silent, but even then nobody took it seriously. Lucky country boy, they said. In the final stage, the evaluator proposed a fight. This unknown kid against two rankers at the same time. On one side, Eddie Markman, prodigy of the most famous archer family in the world, registered in the rankings since the age of 5. On the other, Al Darcy's, the mercenary who single-handedly dismantled an entire criminal organization, took down 7 executives and their boss with his bare hands. Both of them looked at the boy and felt insulted that they had to fight him together. The fight started. Eddie fired the first arrow. The boy dodged and charged at Al at a speed the crowd could barely follow. The two exchanged blows, defended, attacked. Nobody in the room could clearly see what was happening. Then the boy opened Al's guard. The finishing blow was coming. Eddie seized the moment and fired an arrow straight at the boy's body. He cut the arrow out of the air with his sword. Without stopping his movement, nobody breathed, and that's when everyone felt it. A dense, heavy aura, green in color, filling the entire room. The evaluator, Luke, who had spent his whole life studying rankers and never got excited about any of them, looked at that scene and thought one thing only. This boy is a monster. But what nobody in that room knew was why he was there in the first place. In this world, ranking defines a person's status and fuels their desires. It's a place where power, connections, money, and work mean everything. This is where the journey of a boy from the village of Tori begins. Lo, a 16-year-old, is gathering firewood when a villager approaches to ask for his help. Suddenly, a girl appears and throws the man to the ground, demanding that everyone stop asking Lo to do everything for them. This girl is Yuna, also 16 years old, who's always trying to protect Lo's peace and quiet. She explains that the others treat him like a doormat simply because he acts lazy, but in reality, he's just a kind boy and that's his biggest problem. Then Yuna asks him to leave the village with her, mentioning a hidden path that no one knows about. However, an old woman interrupts them, reminding them that the village rules forbid anyone from leaving, and she starts to scold Yuna. Yuna's grandmother asks for her to be locked up for a while since the girl was trying to run away. Soon after, another adult approaches and asks Lo to help him get water, and the boy accepts without a second thought. He and Yuna are the only ones the same age in the village, but they're completely different. Someone advises Lo to rest once in a while, since he also has his own desires. But even so, the boy decides to keep his promise and help the man fetch water. Lo feels indebted to the villagers because when his parents were gone, he was left all alone. Everyone treated him like family, taking great care of him so he wouldn't feel lonely. That's why he wants to pay them back and likes the people of the village so much. Moved, the adult starts to cry and asks if Lo wants to live at his house. But the boy refuses, stating that the villagers are the most important thing in his life and that the world outside doesn't matter that much to him. Meanwhile, Yuna is locked up and her grandmother is scolding her for wanting to run away. The girl questions why they can't leave the village since merchants come and go freely. She asks why they're trapped there if the world outside is so much bigger. The old woman replies that it's because they're outcasts, but she doesn't explain the reason why. She only says that one day time will take care of everything. Elsewhere, while Lo is filling buckets with water, Yuna calls out to him. She managed to escape from her temporary prison, a task that has become easy for her after being caught so many times. She invites him to run away with her, but the boy is afraid that her grandmother will notice and get angry. Yuna insists, saying she wants to show her friend something important. The two of them leave through a hole in a fence and arrive in a forest. For the first time, Lo sees the real outside world and realizes that it's much bigger than his village. Yuna then asks if he knows the rules of the outside world. She reveals that according to a book she secretly took from Merchant, the world out there has a system called ranking. There are adventurers, couriers, doctors, musicians, and various other professions, all with their own ranking. Anyone who makes the list is called a ranker. She goes on to explain that even weapons, food, strength, and wealth are ranked, which makes people constantly compete. Lo understands that the outside world also has its own rules. Yuna then reveals her greatest desire to become a ranked adventurer and travel the world, competing with rivals to become a respected warrior. She says she's made up her mind about her destiny, but Lo insists that he can't leave the village. Yuna invites him to join her on this adventure. But the boy is confused by the request. To convince him, she reminds him of a day when they were 5 years old and a giant bird attacked her. It was Lo who saved her using only a wooden club. He doesn't seem to remember the incident very well, but Yuna assures him it really happened. On that day, she knew that even though he's absent-minded, when Lo really tries, he's stronger than anyone else around him. Yuna told him he would shine much brighter outside the village, and that's why she invited him to explore the world with her. However, Lo refused, insisting he loved his home too much. Since he refused, Yuna declared she would go alone, warning him that he could get stuck in the village forever. Looking back as an adult, Lo realized he'd never really considered that Yuna actually left that day. He stayed outside for a while, thinking about the rankings and everything she had said. When he finally decided to go back, he saw a floating island in the sky. Suddenly, the island shot out a powerful beam of light right in front of him, and then it vanished completely. Terrified, he ran back to his village, only to discover it had also been wiped off the map. Everyone he knew, including his grandmother and Yuna, had disappeared without a trace. At that moment, he remembered what Yuna and the other villagers always said. They would tell him he wasn't alone, hugging him and promising they would be a family forever. Overwhelmed by the loss, Lo collapsed to the ground and began to sob uncontrollably. That's when he heard the voice of a warrior who was regretting that he'd arrived too late again. The man approached and asked if the boy was from Tori village, commenting that the situation must have been difficult. While helping him up, the warrior informed him that the island had already disappeared. Lo started bombarding him with questions, but the man cut him off. He handed Lo a piece of paper with a location written on it and told him to forget the village and go there. When Lo pressed him for more answers, the man shouted, stating that the entire village had disappeared and that he should forget the past. He warned that this was the only thing he could do, otherwise he would become just another victim. Those words, however, had the opposite effect. In that instant, Lo was certain he could become stronger than anyone. He remembered how when he was little, he saw his parents die in a landslide and was left all alone. It was the villagers, especially Yuna, who took care of him. They were good people who never ignored someone who was hurt. And because of that, he couldn't just forget about them. Angrily, Lo declared that he would go to the flying island and bring everyone back, no matter what it took. Suddenly, Lo began to release an immense amount of energy, which left the man in shock. This energy is known as prana, the mental energy of living beings. It's a power that anyone can have, but few know about it, and only talented individuals can use it consciously. Normally, prana is colorless and invisible, but those who possess a large amount can make it visible, and it's said that some races have a special type of prana. The warrior realized this was the survivor from Babel he was supposed to protect, but he figured the kid would probably get out on his own in a few years anyway. Because of this, he threw his own sword to Lo and challenged him, saying that if he wanted to go to the island, he would have to prove his worth. The man promised that if Lo had potential, he would train him himself. He drew his sword and told the boy to attack him with the intent to kill. Lo charged forward, his green prana flaring, and swung his sword. Because he was a beginner, the attack was technically easy to defend. However, the man felt an immense pressure coming from the blow, as well as waves of prana that were simply absurd. Shocked by the boy's strength, the warrior said to himself that he was a monster. The protagonist's power was so great that the fight was already starting to leave marks on the ground. After the confrontation, the man explained that the island was called the Island of the Gods. Normally, it floats over the vast sea and rarely appears anywhere else. Its function is to erase entire peoples and lands, and he was trying to stop that from happening. He shared a theory that the humans caught in the light might have been taken to the Island of the Gods. Lo immediately wanted to know if he would have been taken too if he had touched the light. The man, however, stressed that it was just a theory. He said that maybe the villagers were alive, but there was no telling what was being done to them. To get there, he explained that there was a direct path, the adventure rankings. Lo would need to be in the top 10 because those elite adventurers are the ones responsible for exploring and investigating unknown lands. Adal explained that out of all the rankings, the adventurer ranking has the most participants, and the top-ranked ones are absolute monsters. To get to the Island of the Gods, which is number 1 on the Dangerous Zones ranking, Lo would need to reach the top 10. The knight then asked if the boy really wanted to go, knowing that almost no adventurer ever comes back alive from there. Without hesitation, Lo said yes. So, Adal decided he should start training immediately. The knight promised he would personally teach Lo everything about swords for 1 year. After that period, the boy would have to use that training as a foundation to climb the adventurer rankings on his own. Then, he formally introduced himself as Adal, the number 1 in the knight rankings. At that moment, Lo shook the hand of humanity's strongest warrior. Adal warned that he wouldn't go easy on him since Lo was the first and only person who had managed to cut him, leaving a scar on his chest. The training that followed was brutal. Blisters on Lo's hands and feet burst, muscles tore, bones were crushed, and vital fluid dripped from every opening in his body. After that day, Adal never spoke about the island of the gods again, as if he wanted Lo to figure out the rest on his own. This attitude made Lo believe even more strongly that the people of Toki were still alive. He continued his training, clinging to this theory, always wondering about the reason for the Ville's disappearance. To find out the truth, he needed to reach the top of the adventure rankings. 1 year later, after training relentlessly, he finally felt ready. Lo remembered what Yuna had said about wanting to become a ranked adventurer. Yuna, who dreamed of the outside world, was gone, and he never imagined he'd be the first to set out on a journey. Now, he carried her dream with him. Lo grew a lot in that past year, becoming the disciple of humanity's strongest knight. At that moment, his adventure to the island of the gods began. The scene changes to the kingdom of Vala in the capital city of Trikista. In a branch of the appraisal department, an assistant wakes up a boy named Luke, who is up all night checking the rankings again. She scolds him, saying that as an appraiser, he needs to take care of his own health. After all, unlike her, who just does office work, he's the one who determines people's rankings. Appraisers are sent to every corner of the world to analyze the skills of the rankers. They need to have extensive knowledge and impartial judgment to assess everyone's merit and position, which forces them to go through various tests. It's one of the most demanding jobs that exist, entrusted only to those who are handpicked. Even though he's an appraiser, Luke is still at the lowest level and needs to work hard to climb the rankings and achieve his goals. He knows that for an appraiser, the fastest way to grow is to become the exclusive agent of a talented ranker. However, Luke still hasn't found a ranker he likes enough to dedicate himself to exclusively. He says he's not picky, but he thinks the current rankers are boring. In the past, the competition was more fierce, but now the top spots of all the rankings are locked in. As someone addicted to rankings, Luke believes their value lies in constant updates. That's why he wonders if there's a promising new star who can turn everything upside down. His assistant suggests that this promising ranker might be in the classroom they're observing. It's the third time this year that they're holding the registration exam for the adventure rankings. The number of applicants has increased because the Azaban Forest entered the dangerous zones ranking 2 months ago. She comments that there are a lot of promising people like Old Arcs. Despite having a low number in the mercenary rankings, he's the leader of the Red Wolf group, a very promising newcomer from the country. Besides him, there's also Ed Markman from the Archer rankings. The Markman family is famous for their archery. His father was number 2, and his brother is in 7th place. They say that even at his young age, the speed of Ed's arrow already reaches double digits. Besides them, there are others who look good, including a trade ranker and a sailor. As an experienced evaluator, Luke recognizes most of the promising faces just by looking at them. He understands the adventurer ranking has become especially useful now that so many people are trying to join because of new dangerous zones like the recently classified forest. However, their conversation is cut short by the sound of a bell, which makes the assistant check where the noise is coming from. She sees Lo registering for the adventurer ranking and takes the chance to explain that the system is managed by the evaluation department. This department sends evaluators all over the country to validate the achievements of ranked members. While ranking updates can be done anywhere, the initial registration has to happen at an official agency. Our hero then walks up to take the exam. He hands over the money, fills out the required information, and waits in the room after getting his registration number. To the shock of Luke and the receptionist, the guy shows he has absolutely no idea what the evaluation department is. Ignoring that for now, Luke helps the secretary prepare for the exam by taking care of the paperwork. Soon after, the registration exam for the adventurer ranking begins. It consists of a written test, a practical test, and a final surprise test. The final score determines who passes, and it's explained that even if someone fails one part, a high score in the others can make up for it, so no one should give up. With the rules explained, the aspiring adventurers begin the written test. The material turns out to be extremely complex, and the subject matter is very broad, making things difficult for everyone. 2 hours later, the woman announces the end of the written test and informs them that the practical will begin in another 2 hours. While the candidates are resting, the secretary grabs the pile of papers and asks Luke to help her grade the tests. With a grim look on her face, she picks up the protagonist test and realizes he got every single question wrong. Luke, on the other hand, is annoyed that he has to grade the ridiculous test from these country bumpkins. After the 2 hours are up, the practical test begins, and it's a kind of treasure hunt. The participants have to turn in the items listed on a form, and each item is worth a specific number of points. They're encouraged to get items that are worth a lot of points, but they're strictly forbidden from fighting each other. Since each applicant is good at collecting a different type of item, the test kicks off with everyone running like crazy through the forest. Watching from a distance, Luke and the secretary guess that about half of the adventurers will pass. They notice from their movements that the group seems more prepared this time. However, no one really catches Luke's eye until their conversation is interrupted. A boy shows up carrying a piece of regal, becoming the first person to turn in an item. Satisfied, he decides to stop the test, thinking he'll get enough points with just that one, but he's told that he could get a better ranking if he kept going. Right after that, another boy arrives, frustrated because he thought he was the first one back. He hunted down a fluored feather, which is worth 180 points. A mercenary standing next to him scoffs, saying he's getting cocky over a simple bird feather. In response, the boy brags, explaining that those birds fly at 500 km/h and can't be seen with the naked eye. With that, a pointless rivalry sparks between the two. They start arguing for no apparent reason, driven only by their pride and inflated egos. Their argument is suddenly cut short when the protagonist arrives, dragging an entire bear and surprising everyone. He explains that he brought the whole body because he didn't know how to extract the animal's gallbladder, an item that's worth 300 points. Everyone is in shock, unable to believe he defeated a red bear all by himself. Luke questions him, asking how he managed to recognize a red bear, even though he got a terrible score on the written test. The protagonist answers simply, saying that these bears show up a lot in his village, and that he's very familiar with them. Other candidates who saw him fighting confirm his story, but they admit they didn't actually see what happened because he just drew his sword and in an instant, the bear was down. 1 hour later, everyone gathers in the underground training center for the final stage. Luke addresses the group and asks if they know who adventurers should always be wary of. He answers his own question, saying the biggest threats are beasts and other humans. After all, an adventurer's mission involves exploring new lands and isolated regions, where the most common threats are usually bandits or pirates. Because of this, the final test is a mock battle where the candidates will fight each other. Luke tells them not to get nervous, as it's just to evaluate their skills, and explains the rules weren't revealed earlier to prevent anyone from cheating on the practical exam. Immediately, a big guy provokes the mercenary, claiming he only picked up a rock in the test, and that mercenaries are just loudmouth bullies. He tries to attack, but the mercenary simply grabs his sword and hits him with a pommel strike, knocking him out with a single blow. The secretary allows the victory because of his scores. Besides, it would be stupid to try for a comeback since his third-class rank means he's a monster. Luke then decides to propose a specific battle, and the woman allows it. After a few fights, she announces match number 8. Eddie, the archer who hunted the bird, and the mercenary will fight together against the protagonist. The mercenary and the archer think they're being underestimated by Luke, but he insists his eyes don't make mistakes and that the rookie is a monster. The two of them position themselves in front of the hero. The mercenary introduces himself as Al Darcy's, leader of the Red Wolf group. Last year, his group made a name for themselves in the tests by eradicating the Kamer Mafia from the criminal organization rankings. Rumor has it the young leader defeated 7 executives and the boss all by himself. The boy, on the other hand, is Eddie Markman, the young heir of the Markman family of archers. Trained since childhood by his father, who was once the number 2 ranked archer, Eddie was registered in the rankings at just 5 years old and is considered a talented prodigy. Now, the two of them are facing an unknown but very strong young man. As soon as the fight begins, Markman fires an arrow, but the protagonist dodges it and rushes toward Owl, starting a sword clash. They exchange several blows at high speed, with both skillfully defending themselves so fast that the other fighters can't even follow the action. At one point, our hero manages to push Al Darcy's arm back, opening up his guard to land a blow on his chest. Seizing the opportunity, Eddie fires another arrow in his direction. Surprisingly, the protagonist manages to cut the arrow out of the air with his sword, stopping the attack and leaving everyone in complete shock. No one has ever seen him before, but everyone starts to think he must be among the top-ranked knights. That's when our hero finds out his opponents are ranked in other categories. Markman is number 402 among archers, and Al Darcy's is number 753 among mercenaries. Realizing this, the protagonist declares that if he defeats them both, he'll reach a 3-digit rank. Suddenly, he releases an absurd aura that fills the entire dueling hall, and Luke notices that it's prana, so dense that you can see the color of his aura with the naked eye. Markman tries to sound tough, stating that the rankings aren't just for professions, and that in the sniper ranking, which evaluates precision, he's in the 78th position. However, as he prepares to fire an arrow after saying this, he simply collapses to the ground, defeated. Aldarcus is in shock since he couldn't even see the move that took him down. Then the swordsman starts walking slowly toward him, emanating a green prana. Suddenly, our hero disappears and reappears behind him. Upon feeling the cold blade of the sword on his neck, Aldarcus gives up, explaining that he has to work later and doesn't want to get knocked out like Eddie Markman. He admits the protagonist is a monster and wonders who he really is. Everyone in the room is shocked as he defeated 2 3-digit rankers all by himself. Officially, it's announced that the winner is candidate number 3. Immediately, Luke runs over to his computer and opens the exclusive evaluators list of rankers. He finds a profile of 17-year-old Lo Tully and notes that he has no prior record. This makes sense with his story about coming from a very remote village and confirms he isn't a criminal or a member of any special cult. Luke felt like he just hit the lottery by finding a hidden talent like that, so he rushed off to offer his services as an exclusive appraiser. He asked Lo to be his ranker, but he quickly realized other appraisers had the same idea and were already trying to convince the swordsman. For a moment, Luke thought he was too late and that he should have investigated someone's background before making an offer. To his surprise, our hero didn't even know what an exclusive appraiser was, so Luke stepped up to explain. He clarified that an exclusive appraiser is someone dedicated to a single ranker whose job is to update their ranking regularly. Normally, you'd have to wait for the appraisal department to send someone, but with an exclusive appraiser, the update happens on the spot, anywhere. This advantage is highly valued by adventurers who are always traveling. Besides, exclusive appraisers always have the most up-to-date information. So, if Lo wanted to climb the ranks quickly, hiring one was the best way to go. Hearing the proposal, our protagonist set one condition for accepting their help. He wanted to know if any of the appraisers there could get him into the top 10 of the adventure ranking. The other appraisers backed off, explaining that excellent swordsmanship alone wasn't enough to get that far. Hearing this, our hero simply turned his back and started to walk away. But Luke ran after him, desperate. Calling out to Lo, the young appraiser asked why he wanted to get into the top 10 of that specific ranking so badly. Our hero replied that it was none of his business, but Luke insisted that it was. He declared that he would become his exclusive appraiser and help him reach his goal. Lo, however, refused, saying he didn't want to put a child in danger. Luke retorted that before being a child, he was an official appraiser. Even so, Lo stood his ground, explaining that he had no intention of hiring anyone because he didn't want to involve more people in his mission. That's when Luke shouted that he also had something he needed to do, a mission he wanted to complete, even if it cost him his life. And that's why he wanted to team up with Lo. The intensity in his words made the swordsman remember the ambition he himself had a year ago when he decided to go to the island to save everyone. Understanding the boy's determination, he gave in, saying that he also had something very important to do. Luke then formally introduced himself and promised he would guide him to become one of the best in the ranking. Convinced, Lochley shook his hand, sealing the deal. Soon after, they went to a very nice room that Luke had already rented for them to use as a base for a few days. Our hero praised Luke's skills, and Luke replied confidently that getting that room had been easy. The young appraiser then declared that he would prove his competence within a week, and that unlike before, Lo would be begging him to be his exclusive appraiser. Luke observed that although Lo was an incredible fighter, he seemed a bit out of it outside of battles. A short time later, the test results came out. Lo's new rank was position 2728. Luke congratulated him on passing the registration test, stating that getting into the 2000s was already a great start. Lo, however, was disappointed as he expected to be in the triple digits. After all, he had defeated 2 opponents who were at that level. Luke explained that the adventurer ranking had a lot more people, so the competition was tougher. He said that no matter how strong someone was, there was a limit to their starting position. However, he revealed that Lo had other impressive rankings, like 58th place in sword speed, which in the appraisal department's view was the true representation of his talent. Luke continued, explaining that the 2 men he faced also had rankings in several other categories. Old Arcs, for example, held positions in the cleaning, informant, and reliable boss rankings, while Eddie Markman was in the sniper, reconnaissance, and even mushroom cultivation rankings. Being in multiple rankings made it easier to get jobs, which is why he suggested Lo register for others, too. Lo, however, stated he wasn't looking for jobs. Luke understood immediately, realizing that Lo's only goal was to get into the top 10 as quickly as possible, so he could then go to the Island of the Gods. He knew this because that was the only special privilege granted to the top 10 in the adventure ranking. Lo suggested he'd tell his reason after the trial period, and Luke agreed to share his as well, making it a fair deal between the 2 of them. Then Luke admitted there was a reason that was difficult to explain to a newcomer, but that he was investigating the dark side of the rankings. Curious, he asked where Lo's power and swordsmanship came from since it clearly wasn't something you could learn overnight. Lo then explained that a year ago, he became the disciple of a knight named Adal. The news left Luke in shock because Adal was none other than the #1 knight in the world. Lo confirmed that, even though he was his disciple, he was only with him for 1 year. Luke considered the information a bombshell. After all, Adal was famous for never teaching swordsmanship to anyone, having turned down countless training requests over the years. The general belief was that Adal was waiting to pass on his techniques to the highest-ranked knight of the next generation. Because of this, a crowd of knights was desperately trying to climb the ranks in hopes of being trained by him. Luke commented that the other knights would freak out if they knew Lo had inherited Adal's techniques. Lo, for his part, admitted he never imagined his master was actually the strongest man in humanity, just like he'd always claimed. Luke clarified that being #1 meant being the strongest in the world. It was then that Lo revealed something even more surprising. He had defeated Adal with his sword once, and the knight himself admitted that Lo was the first person to ever land hit on him. Luke was stunned to hear such bombshells coming from someone with such a deadpan expression. He checked the rankings database, and since the name Tully had never appeared before, he asked if it was a disguise. Lo explained that he didn't have a last name due to a cultural difference. It was Adal who told him to adopt the last name Tully so he could go to the island of the gods. He warned him that the risk would be high, but if he did well, some clues would naturally come his way. The boy stated it wasn't a disguise, but the name of his dear family. With that, Luke finished his work as an assessor for the day and took off his hat. At that moment, Lo finally noticed that Luke was actually a woman. She got angry that he hadn't noticed sooner, but Lo quickly apologized. Satisfied with her new client's realization, Luke invited him to get some coffee, marking the first step of a long journey together. With their partnership established, they came up with a strategy for Lo to reach the top 10 of the adventure rankings. To climb the ranks, he needed achievements. And although territory development and exploration were the basics, Luke recommended that he start by accepting missions. She explained that many people needed the strength of adventurers for gathering and investigation, and that these missions offered rewards, making them ideal for beginners. He could accept missions through the assessment department or a guild. To make it easier, she showed him the rank cell, a handy device for finding tasks. Luke offered him unlimited use of the device if he accepted her as his exclusive assessor. Lo thought about the offer and asked if there was a mission that could boost his rank significantly all at once. Luke then showed him the department's most difficult missions, which clearly indicated how much they would influence the rankings. Without hesitating, Lo chose the first one on the list, a mission with a 6-skull difficulty in a level 7 danger zone. Retrieve the treasure from the sunken temple of Luciana. The assessor was firm, stating that at his current level, he wouldn't stand a chance in that dungeon and that he should trust her expert eyes. She insisted that the mission was way too difficult and that he would die before he even had a chance to rank up. However, looking at her very seriously, the hero declared that he wanted to try since his final goal, the island of the gods, was the #1 danger zone. If he backed down now, he'd have no chance of ever getting there. Realizing that Lo was much more stubborn than she had imagined, Luke started to think of another way to convince him. It was at that moment that a man in a suit appeared, asking if they were having some kind of problem. Luke recognized him instantly and introduced him as Ludbroward. Ludbroward was a powerhouse adventurer, ranked 11th in the fiercely competitive general rankings. Lo knew the man was a monster, just as Adal had warned. He was an elite hunter, and if he moved up just one more rank, he'd be able to challenge the dreaded island of the gods. Seizing the opportunity, Luke asked L.A. for help in dealing with the stubborn rookie. This talk, however, was going to be a duel, so they headed to an arena. Once there, the 11th ranked adventurer grabbed a makeshift weapon that looked a little too light for him. Our protagonist introduced himself formally, but his opponent quickly cut him off, saying that in the adventure rankings, nobody cared about formalities. Loud mentioned that Luke had recently updated the rankings. He said that on top of her vast knowledge, she had a rare conviction for creating precise classifications, a passion that was unusual among evaluators. Since it was a direct request from her, he was willing to go all out and teach the rookie a lesson. Just by looking at him, our hero could feel Loud's strength. He hesitated to move forward, sensing he'd be impaled by the spear. Watching from a distance, Luke thought this was Lo's golden opportunity to understand how big the world really was. But the boy already knew that. He remembered his village being abducted by the island of the gods. With his determination renewed, rank number 2728 charged at rank number 11. He attacked with his sword and La defended with a makeshift spear. Then Lo unleashed a powerful aura-infused slash, but his opponent dodged it easily. Loud noticed the boy channeled prana into his sword and released it in a single strike. He was also using the same energy in his hands and feet to increase his agility. The swordsmanship belonged to the Sword Saint style, a secret technique passed down only among successors, and he couldn't believe a child had mastered it. Realizing he was overthinking it, Lawa refocused on the fight just in time to see the hero trying an attack from behind. Lo struck at the adventurer's back, but Laud dodged by simply tossing his spear backward. Calmly, Laud started moving and attacking at the same time, noting that Lo's prana was greater than his own, even though the boy was so young. As they fought at high speed amidst an intense glow of energy, the rank 11 adventurer asked what Lo's race was. Lo didn't understand the question. La stated that his pranalo wasn't something you could acquire over time. He added that if he had to, he'd find out the boy's race the hard way. Realizing the young man could also use enchantments, Laud planted his spear in the ground and began to chant. The furious horse of the crags crosses mountains, gasping for air. The sunlight makes the sacred tree bloom once more. The turbulent waters meet, and peace shatters into shards. As he leaped, he activated the Wind Tribe's enchantment, warning Lo that he would die if he didn't defend himself. The attack manifested as several spiritual spears that shot toward our protagonist. He tried to defend himself with his sword and prana, but his enemy warned him that an ordinary blade couldn't block that enchantment. Our hero managed to dodge most of them, but took a few spectral hits to the stomach. He then remembered Adel telling him his prana control was still raw, but that once he got used to it, he would learn the techniques little by little. At that moment, he remembered the first and most basic technique, the shimmering blade. Mimicking the number 1 knight's pose, our hero unleashed an extremely strong and fast gale of prana at his enemy. However, Laud simply spun his spear and completely canceled the attack. Seizing the opening, the protagonist lunged forward with a low slash, a cut so fast it was invisible to the naked eye. Even so, Laud managed to dodge and counterattack, throwing an energy spear that sent the boy flying. He admitted the young man was admirable, but there was a huge gap in power between them. With a snap of his fingers, Laud made thousands of magical golden spears appear in the air, hovering over the hero. He warned Lo never to underestimate the adventurer rankings, and then he launched the devastating attack. Seeing thousands of spears heading his way, our hero felt that he had truly lost the fight. As the hero lay defeated on the ground, the winner of the fight, Lud Broward, was announced. Luke commented that Lo must now understand the power difference between them, and Lud in turn asked if she had really believed in the kid until the very end. She admitted that she thought it might be possible, especially since he was Adel's disciple. Lud then revealed that the moment he saw the high-speed slash, he recognized it as the Sword Saint style, and he wondered how that was even possible. The Sword Saint style is an incredibly powerful swordsmanship passed down to a single successor and inherited by elite knights for generations. The fact that an adventurer like the kid had inherited it was shocking. From a knight's point of view, it was as if he had stolen something sacred. That's why Luke thought it would be best for him to avoid conflicts with other knights from now on, as it would be smart if he didn't want to end up getting eliminated. If he acted like a knight, the problem could be solved, but that was impossible since he really wanted to be an adventurer. Actually, Luke's reason for believing in Lo went beyond the Sword Saint style. It was because he said he landed a hit and she believed him. Elle thought it was impossible for him to have landed a hit at his current level. But Luke, although she also had her doubts, didn't rule out the possibility because she knew Lo wasn't the type to lie. The man agreed that must be the reason. After all, besides the shocking style, the glow of prana the boy gave off was also very impressive. Luke added that he also possessed enchantments, and Lud concluded that if he had used them, he could have actually won. In the middle of this conversation, a scene from the past flashed through the hero's mind. A woman was singing in his house until an old woman appeared, yelling at her because of the poem and claiming it was his fault they couldn't get out of that situation. The woman then apologized to Lo. At that exact moment, he woke up in a hospital bed, confused after the dreams of his hidden past. Luke explained that he was in the infirmary of the evaluation department and that he had been sleeping all day. According to the doctor, it seemed to be accumulated mental exhaustion. Not quite understanding what was going on, Luke asked if he wasn't pushing himself too hard in training. Thinking about everything he'd been through, the protagonist admitted she was right. Luke then said she had something important to tell him and asked if he knew what enchantments were. Our protagonist said no, and she began to explain. Enchantments are a special way of using prana, something that only a few races can do naturally, although many high-ranking adventurers have also mastered the skill. Curious, the hero asked if Lud was one of those cases. Luke confirmed, explaining that he's a warrior from the Broward tribe, a race focused on combat and hunting that lives in swampy regions. Since their techniques are passed down orally in the form of poems, they became known as enchantments. Also, because there's a genetic component, it's very difficult to learn them as an adult. Lud's enchantment really surprised the protagonist. However, Luke revealed something even more shocking. He also had enchantments inside him. She then asked if he had any idea what he was carrying. The boy just guessed it was something powerful enough to be a major asset as a ranker. Confident, Luke stated that he had the potential to become a high-ranking adventurer, and that's exactly why she chose a perfect mission for him in his rank cell. The mission was an investigation in the Azaban forest located in a hazardous zone. Officially, it was an ecological survey. But the job wasn't just about studying animals. In fact, several people had recently disappeared in the area, and the adventurers who took on this same mission vanished without a trace. Luke explained that at first only lower-ranked adventurers were disappearing in the forest. However, the situation got worse when even an adventurer ranked at position 800 vanished without a trace. She revealed that if Lo could figure out what was behind these disappearances, he could jump 200 spots in the rankings all at once. However, the risk was proportional to the reward. Without any hesitation, Laozi accepted the mission, and Luke made it clear she only recommended him because she believed in his abilities. She then registered the mission in the rank cell and gave an important warning about the Azaban forest. The area is home to protected species and has many restricted zones. Luke assured him that with her by his side, everything should go smoothly, but he would need to be extremely cautious. The boy then asked what would happen if he broke the rules. Luke replied that his rank would drop drastically. She explained that no matter how skilled an adventurer is, destroying the ecosystem or failing a mission seriously damages their reputation, and the ranking system is built on credibility. Excited, she concluded that this mission marked the beginning of a new chapter in their journey. It was the first step toward a rapid climb in the adventurer rankings, stating that they would do their best by working as a team. She convinced him to set off. Together, they headed toward the Azaban forest. Meanwhile, in another part of the same forest, a man was finishing off another adventurer. He commented that the evaluation department didn't care about weaklings like the one he had just killed. To him, trying to climb the ranks the conventional way was foolish. The mysterious man approached a Unihazer, a creature with a valuable horn. He knew that a single horn from that creature would be enough to quickly boost him into the 3-digit ranks. He reflected that brute force doesn't guarantee a higher rank, and that the system exists at the expense of those who suffer from injustice. His name was Rosso Cruel, ranked 7th among smugglers. Looking around the area, he decided he wouldn't abandon such a promising hunting ground. His goal was clear to reach the top 100. His next target was already set. Dalcan Iris, the adventurer ranked at position 672. When Lewis arrived at the forest entrance, a knight checked his rank, recognizing him as adventurer number 2728. Once he was allowed in, he asked how many people were in the adventure rankings. The guard informed him that there were around 30,000, but only 20,000 were active. She commented that his stats didn't seem to match his rank. She explained that a person's adventurer rank is often very different from their other rankings. For example, someone with a 4-digit adventurer rank could be in the 3-digit range in another specialty. The guard continued, saying that the higher someone's adventurer rank is, the higher their other ranks tend to be as well. Louis thought about this, remembering that his swordsmanship rank was already in the 2-digit range. This made him stronger than the opponents he faced in the exam. However, he wanted to get even stronger, and that was the only thing on his mind. Just then, Luke announced that their journey into the forest would begin now. They entered the Azaban forest, danger zone number 48. Almost immediately, Louis felt something strange. With a single glance, he finally sensed the danger of the place, a feeling that only experienced adventurers can pick up on. An ordinary person would never notice it, and that was why a ranking for dangerous zones existed. Luke explained that the forest was added to the ranking because a huge outbreak of demonic beasts was discovered in the area 2 months ago. The exact moment she finished speaking, bizarre monsters appeared and charged at them. Luke said that now it was Lewis's turn to protect her. Without a second thought, the hero unleashed a slash and began taking out the creatures. He leaped up, grabbed a monstrous bird by its beak, and slammed it to the ground. Next, he launched a gale slash with his green prana, and the energy wiped out the remaining enemies in a single attack. He remembered Adel, the man who taught him the gale technique. Our protagonist had learned a few techniques, but he couldn't use all of them yet. He felt that maybe, just maybe, he could use the second one now. Suddenly, a blood orc, one of the most dangerous creatures in the rankings, appeared before them. Louis decided this was the perfect opportunity to test if he could unleash Adel's second technique. He began to emanate an overwhelming amount of prana, using the Halphotis technique, and striking the blood orc with a shaped slash. The blow hit its target, but it didn't seem to have any effect on the creature, which prepared to counterattack. In response, Louis panicked and started running away, yelling that his attack had failed. He really thought it was going to work, leaving Luke in shock since he was the one who was supposed to be protecting her. Running for their lives, they found themselves at the edge of a cliff. Without a second to think, Lizzie took a huge leap, holding Luke under his arms as they fell toward the ground. Despite the scare, they landed safely without any injuries. Even so, Luke was terrified and complained that he should have warned her before doing something so dangerous. Louis just explained that his master trained him that way, and it had become a habit for him. Finally, they reached the center of the forest, the area they needed to investigate to complete their mission. Luke explained that ever since the Azaban forest was ranked as a dangerous zone, she had already explored 80% of the area. The remaining 20%, where they were now, was a nest of monsters and had therefore remained unexplored. Looking at the various mystical creatures and exotic plants in the area, Louis commented that it was the first time he'd ever seen anything like it. In that moment, he finally understood what it meant to be an adventurer, remembering the dream his sister, Yuna, had her entire life. Suddenly, Louis noticed some movement and drew his sword to attack. But Luke quickly stopped him, pointing out that it was an injured creature. She wondered what the best way to approach the animal would be, identifying it as a royal horn, the number 4 beast on the ranking of rare and nearly extinct species. Seeing that the animal was hurt, Luke decided she would help it since she had learned basic first aid to take care of Hunter and also Lousy himself when he got beat up by Laua. Luke then told Louis they would set up a base in that area for the day. As an agent of the evaluation department, she couldn't just abandon a creature like that. She made sure to state that taking care of a royal horn was part of an ecological research and that he shouldn't get the wrong idea, as if she were choosing the animal over him. So, the two of them set up camp in the forest to rest. While they were sleeping around the campfire, Lizzie took the opportunity to continue training his prana sword skills. He tried once more to unleash the half-lotus technique against the tree. But even though the blast of prana flew far, it had no effect when it hit the trunk. Frustrated, he lay down on the ground completely exhausted. Realizing he hadn't accomplished anything at this rate, he would never reach the island of the gods, and he knew he needed to get stronger fast. Mr. Laut's words about him having enchantments came back to his mind. Louis meditated, trying to understand what it meant until he eventually fell asleep. He didn't wake up until the next day when the sunlight hit his eyes. Luke was already awake because the creature had started thrashing around in the middle of the night. The royal horn was agitated and was growling at something in the distance. Despite this, it recovered very quickly thanks to the proper treatment. Luke explained that since it was still a baby, it would normally get attached to people, but this one was skittish, just as she suspected someone had hurt it on purpose. To prove it, she showed Louis the broken part of its horn, which clearly indicated an attack by an illegal hunter. She went on to explain that the beast's horn is considered a type of miracle cure. For that reason, they were captured relentlessly, which led to them being listed as a rare species. Even with hunting being banned, the demand didn't disappear, and poachers continue to operate in secret. On the black market, the horn is sold as if it were from a unicorn. Just then, the royal horn creature tried to attack Luke, but our hero protected her, blocking its horn with his sword. Startled, the animal started to run away from Lizzie. Luke immediately went after it, worried because it wasn't 100% recovered yet. She commented that until now, there had been no record of a royal horn in the Azaban forest, so following it was part of her ecological research. Lizzie said he would also go on ahead after the creature. After all, the zone's ranking would go up if they found this exotic monster. Luke then told him to track it secretly through the area. The creature proved to be very fast and was soon out of sight, but Louis kept following the tracks it left behind. He was making his way through the forest when suddenly he was attacked and forced to stop running. The man who attacked him appeared before him, saying that this was a hunter's lucky day. Lo countered the attack, and their swords clashed in a head-on confrontation. During the fight, our hero unleashed a prana strike that almost hit the enemy. When he saw the color of that energy, the man was so shocked that he immediately stopped fighting and raised his arms to surrender. That's when Lo recognized his opponent's voice, and looking closer, he noticed a kid with a bow and arrow on a nearby branch. He finally realized it was Eddie and Owl, the two he had faced in the academy duel. The scene shifts to the next day during the adventure ranking registration. When a receptionist asked which ranking he had chosen, Lo confirmed that he chose the adventure ranking. Coincidentally, Ed was also there to pick up a mission, and that's when the two met. As rivals, they stared each other down in silence for a while in a contest to see who would speak first. Finally, Ed broke the silence and asked if Lo had found out anything about the swordsman who defeated them. Lo answered that he had, but he didn't have any concrete information. He revealed that as hard as it was to believe, The swordsman had no rank at all before that fight. Ed confessed that even though it might not seem like it, he was considered a prodigy in the archery rankings. Because of that, losing so badly to an unranked rookie completely crushed his pride. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Captain Owl was being congratulated by his band of mercenaries. He told them he had also registered for the adventure rankings, and everyone celebrated his arrival. They bet that he had done well and given the other candidates a hard time. However, Owl revealed that's not quite what happened, admitting that he lost the fight. His group didn't believe him, saying he must have held back so he wouldn't hurt his opponent. After all, someone with a 3-digit rank among mercenaries would never lose to a rookie. At that moment, filled with rage, Owl slammed his fist on a table and broke it. He was furious with the rookie who didn't even look him in the face, feeling that Lo Tully had treated him with disdain as if he were just a stepping stone. Because of this, he declared that starting the next day, they would triple their training, leaving everyone in shock. One of the girls in the group mentioned she wanted to take on new missions, but Captain Owl said that wasn't enough. He declared that the world was much bigger than they imagined and that he would start training for real again. Later, while talking with Ed, Owl admitted that his pride was also hurt by Lo in the battle. He hadn't planned on focusing on the adventure rankings, but he refused to feel looked down on like that. This was especially true because they both already had high rankings in other categories, which really shook their egos. They compare their positions. Ed's adventurer rank was 6,725, while Owl's was 631. To their surprise, the rank of Lo, the man who defeated them, was 2,728. Seeing they were almost 4,000 positions behind, they believed it would be easy to climb the ranks and surpass him. With the same goal in mind, they decided to take on a mission together and chose the Azaban Forest. It had recently been added to the list of dangerous zones and was great for gaining experience. That's why the two of them went there and ended up running into Lo. Back in the present in the forest, Lo said they would talk later and started running without wasting any time. While sheathing his sword, he explained that the royal horn was injured. Ed and Owl immediately understood that he wanted to protect the beast that had been attacked by hunters. They followed him, keeping up with his extremely fast pace. During the chase, the young archer explained that to move through the forest, you had to use the uneven terrain to your advantage, using pieces of rock to jump off of and increase your speed. Watching the technique, our hero immediately copied the move and managed to speed up his run as well. Suddenly, they spotted another beast that had captured the royal horn, wrapping it up in its tongue. Without hesitating, the two of them drew their weapons to save the creature. Lo rushed forward and landed a precise cut on the monster's tongue, injuring it. Realizing he couldn't get any closer for a second attack, he prepared to use long-range slashes. However, Lo decides against it since the royal horn would also be hit by his long-range attacks. Instead, he asks if Ed can create an opening and without hesitating tells the archer to aim for the creature's eyes while he keeps running. Ed obeys, and the moment he fires 2 arrows, they hit the monster right in the eyes. The creature screams in agony, and right after, Lo tells Ed to aim for its legs. Meanwhile, our protagonist slides across the ground and pulls his arm back to charge up energy. He then prepares a sword strike, unleashing a powerful slash with his prana enveloping the blade. At that exact moment, Owl cuts through a tree trunk, which starts to fall on top of the monster. The giant tree hits the enormous purple beast, finishing off the creature and allowing them to save the royal horn together. After the battle, the mercenary captain states that he's used to ordering subordinates around, which makes Ed angry for being called one. Despite their anger, they acknowledge that Lo's swordsmanship is incredible, but they figure that's not enough to reach the top 10. They realize that just defeating creatures to climb the adventure rankings isn't enough, and that Lo needs to learn other skills besides swordsmanship to truly stand out. A little later, Luke finally arrives and apologizes to Lo for being late, asking what the hell had just happened there. She explains that she thought they were illegal hunters, but luckily it was all just a misunderstanding that was cleared up quickly. Luke expresses her relief that Lo didn't just attack like a madman and instead resolve the situation by talking. Then she jokes that she'll have to lower their rank, but quickly clarifies that it's a joke. However, she warns that just because he held back, next time she'll lower their rank for real. Hearing the threat, the two boys, who almost lost their rank, promise they'll be more careful. Curious, Ed asks why Lo brought an evaluator with him, and our hero replies that it's easier to climb the ranks that way. Owl, however, disagrees and thinks it's the same as being watched 24 hours a day. He doesn't like the idea, arguing that it'll just mean more work for Lo, like cleaning duty, and that most of the time they'll just make him risk his life every day. Owl concludes that this will happen because Lo is being used for other people's interests. Lo then asks why the evaluators would want him to improve so much. Al replies that it's the only way for them to get promoted since evaluators move up in rank whenever they update the rankings. In other words, adventurers whose ranks climb quickly are an easy way for evaluators to get a promotion. He tells Lo to watch out, stating that Luke is using him as a stepping stone to get ahead. Hearing this, Lo becomes doubtful. He wonders if she would really do something like that since she doesn't seem like the type of person to act that way. At that moment, their conversation is interrupted when Luke finishes scouting the area and declares that the coast is clear. Suddenly, the royal horn monster approaches and starts rubbing against her as if they've become friends. But the creature shows no concept of personal space. Ed and Owl don't find the scene cute at all and comment that the animal is being ungrateful. However, Luke explains that it's acting this way because of how intimidating the two of them were, adding that Lo has a scary aura, even though he didn't do anything wrong. Luke then changes the subject, mentioning that the magic beast they defeated has been causing a lot of trouble. She reveals that they had never come across this predator before, since its natural habitats are cold places and there are no records of it ever existing in the Azaban forest. Because of this, she and Lo came to the region on a reconnaissance mission. Next, Luke asks what Ed and Owl are doing there, and Owl replies that they were on a similar mission that they picked up from the department. Luke is surprised since she didn't expect there to be missions for mercenaries and archers in the forest. She realizes her presence must have influenced them to take on a mission just to climb the ranks. Realizing this, she decides to change the mood and share some good news with Lo, saying she has something important for him. She reveals that his speed ranking has been updated. The sword technique he used was so fast that she already requested to have the feat added to the rankings. Luke explains that thanks to his technique, Lo has reached the 26th spot on the speed ranking, which is a combination of several others. He's visibly happy with the news, recognizing that he used a technique that's hard to see with the naked eye, even though to regular people it might not look like much. Lo is sure he did well since he was just acting on pure instinct. Impressed, he asks if Luke is always this amazing, and she takes the chance to brag a bit about helping him move up in the rankings. At that moment, Lo decides to be honest with Ed and Owl, which leaves Owl a little annoyed. The young swordsman confesses that there's something they need to know. He admits he's not good at absolutely anything that doesn't involve his sword. The two of them realize the kid has dedicated his entire life just to sword training. Lo explains that during the fight, it was Ed who saved him because he didn't know how to keep up with the pace of fighting as a team. Owl then explains that his instinct for command is natural since as the leader of a mercenary group, he constantly has to come up with plans so he doesn't lose his men. He explains that formations, instructions, everyone's positioning, and deciding who delivers the final blow are all vital in an attack. Owl asks if Lo is interested in learning about this, but adds that his swordsmanship is already good enough and he might not need his advice. Even so, Lo insists and asks them to teach him everything since he knows he needs more skills to survive. They agree to give him some tips on how to move through the forest, explaining that he needs to use all 5 of his senses. Seeing Lo's determination, Luke feels proud of his progress and is happy to be helping him. Despite this moment of bonding, Luke can't help but feel that the presence of illegal hunters and an unidentified demonic beast is terrifying. She feels like something is very wrong in the Azaban forest and worries this mission might be too much for the team to handle. Meanwhile, the 2 illegal hunters who are looking for the missing beast end up finding Lo's group. One of them, Iris, comments that their organs will be fresh and worth a fortune. Even though they're no match for the beast, she decides to capture them anyway, saying that anyone who enters a beast territory should expect to be torn to shreds. Back with the group, Ed starts the lesson, explaining that using all 5 senses isn't an easy task. He says that using sight, hearing, smell, and even taste in combat requires proper training. He says the forest is the perfect place for it since the smells of the plants and animals are so strong there. Owl admits he doesn't really get the plan, and Ed teases him, saying it must be hard for a mercenary to get used to anything besides the smell of blood. To demonstrate, Ed reveals that he can sense exactly how many animals are around them right now, even while keeping his prana flow low. He explains that prana is a fluid talent that allows a person to focus their perception. This lets them sharpen one of their chosen senses. Encouraged, Lo starts to focus his prana on his perception of the environment. Suddenly, he starts giving off a huge amount of energy, shocking everyone with the sudden burst of power. The prana spreads out quickly, sharpening all 5 of his senses at once. It allows him to see everything around him, including one of the illegal hunters from the Dreads hiding nearby. Immediately, Lo grabs his sword and prepares to attack, warning Luke that someone is watching them. But just as he says someone is getting closer, he's hit by a devastating punch. The blow is so powerful it sends Lo flying, causing him to crash through several trees before he hits the ground, apparently passed out from the pain. The illegal hunter who attacked him appears, complaining loudly about who was leaking prana all over the place and calling it disgusting. He then reveals that this uncontrolled energy is exactly what allowed him to track the group so easily. Right away, the mercenary and the archer draw their weapons, preparing for battle. However, Luke stops them, revealing that their opponent is Dalsin Iris, number 672 in the adventure rankings. The information leaves everyone in shock since an adventurer with a 3-digit rank is much stronger than they are. Luke explains that he knows Dalsin because of his famous history, mentioning that he was about to break into the 2-digit ranks until he committed a crime that made his ranking plummet. Just then, Rosso appears and comments on Dalsin Iris's incredible speed. Dalsin notices the appraiser's presence, though he doesn't recognize her. She, on the other hand, immediately identifies Rosso as the black market merchant ranked at position. Realizing this, Dalin comments that she's well informed for knowing about the crime ranking. He then explains that this ranking has a hierarchy reflecting the severity of a criminal's actions. He gives notable examples like the assassin and thief rankings and adds that higher positions usually indicate an addiction to hard drugs. Dalin adds that the crime ranking is one of several unofficial rankings created by users themselves, since in this world, there are classifications that aren't just made by official institutions. He mentions that high-quality rankings are sometimes compared and even bought by government bodies as long as they don't violate ethics, while others are maintained and updated with the support of enthusiasts. It's then that they spot the unicorn they were looking for. Luke stands in front of Dalsin, blocking him from getting near the royal horn, and questions why he's hanging around with a criminal like Rosso. The adventurer replies without hesitation that he's doing it for money. This shocks Luke since someone with Dalsin's skill level could easily earn money, honestly. However, Dalsin clarifies that money isn't the only thing he wants, stating that there are 2 reasons for his alliance with Rosso. One is to sell products, and the other is to buy them. He then taunts the appraiser, asking if she knows that rankings can be bought. The insinuation makes Luke furious, but Dalsin doesn't seem to care one bit. Annoyed, Owl tries to attack Dalsin with his sword, but the adventurer blocks the strike by catching the blade with just his fingers. Next, Eddie fires an arrow at him, declaring that their mission is to patrol the forest and that someone as dangerous as Dalin can't be left to run loose. Realizing he'll have to clean up this mess the old-fashioned way, Dalin gets irritated and starts releasing his purple prana with overwhelming force, causing his muscles to grow. He prepares a devastating punch aimed at the mercenary who freezes in shock, feeling like he's going to die from that single blow. It's at that exact moment that Lo reappears to save him. Nodding an immense amount of prana, the protagonist puts his sword in front of the attack and blocks the enemy's punch. The 2 opponents stare each other down and ask who the other is, but Lo's prana proves to be superior, overpowering Dalin's. The confrontation intensifies into a powerful clash of their magic. With prana radiating from his body, Lo charges at the enemy, forcing him to retreat from his strength. Luke asks if Lo is okay, and he confirms that he is. Then Lo asks if the man in front of him is the illegal hunter, and the appraiser confirms that there's no doubt he was the one hunting the royal horn. With that confirmation, Lo uses a hurricane skill with his green prana, launching the magic at his enemy. However, Dalkin blocks the attack by crossing his arms and surrounding them with his purple energy. He's impressed that a kid like this is using prana, which is so unusual. Lo notices that his attacks barely tickle Dalsin, who proves to be extremely tough. He then remembers a warning from Aldo, who told him to be careful when encountering someone who uses prana. Aldo had explained that Loa was a special case. Normally, you have to be a master in some area, whether with swords or other weapons, to awaken this hidden power through deep study. Lo remembers that according to Aldo, prana is more than just energy. It's an obsession. In other words, if someone is aware of prana, they're probably a master of something specific. He remembers a time he was climbing a mountain with Doug and had a really tough time. But those words encourage him to face his enemy. As he gets ready, Luke warns him that Dalcon Iris is ranked 12th in boxing, 48th in beast taming, 19th in grip strength, and 7th in weightlifting, possessing world-class strength. So, she advises him not to get close and to fight from a distance. Annoyed that his stats were revealed like that, Dalcon Iris declares he's going to crush the girl first. He then touches a tree and without much effort rips it right out of the ground using his prana. Holding the trunk with just one arm, he braces himself and hurls the entire tree right at Luke. However, Lo acts fast to save her, slicing the tree in half with his sword, which is glowing with a powerful aura. Luke gets worried, realizing that a defense that intense takes a huge toll on him. Watching the scene, the old man Rosso notices that the boy's prana is very strange. He orders Dal and Iris to capture him, saying it will make them a lot of money. Dalsin replies that he'll take the kid, assuming he survives the fight. Just then, Eddie fires 2 arrows at the boxer, but the illegal hunter easily blocks them with a prana-wrapped arm, saying the 2 of them are so weak they're not even worth remembering. Immediately after, Captain Owl throws a bomb. When it hits the ground, it releases a huge cloud of smoke, creating a smoke screen that blocks everyone's view of the fight. Furious, the villain tells them not to mess with him and winds up for a huge punch. He slams his fist into the ground, causing a shock wave that radiates through the forest and destroys everything around it. When the dust settles, Dowson realizes they all escaped while he was preparing to attack. Rosso scolds him, warning that the move was so dangerous that even Dowson himself could have been killed by it. Meanwhile, the group had used the smoke screen to escape with the wolf since they knew they stood no chance against the enemy in a battle of brute strength. Their best bet was to run since that guy was extremely strong, ranked in the top 600 adventurers, a fact that terrified our protagonist. During the escape, the royal horn slips from his grasp, much to his annoyance. A little later, Luke says they've gone far enough and should be in a safe area, but adds that now they have a lot more work to do. She explains that cruel Rosso has to be captured because he's too dangerous. That's when our hero finally realizes that Rosso is the man with the beard, and he asks Luke why she wants to capture him. Luke explains that it's a personal goal, which confuses Owl and Eddie. They say they don't know what she's talking about, but they want to decide what to do next. Luke apologizes to Lo Tully for getting ahead of herself, and reminds them that their official mission is to patrol the Azaban forest, so they need to keep monitoring the 2 villains. As an official agent, she states that none of them stand a chance in a direct confrontation, and Al agrees, suggesting they should just observe. Once they can expose the duo's crimes, they'll report it to the department, which will take care of the rest. Although Luke still thinks the plan is dangerous, Owl and Eddie are determined. Currently ranked around 6,000 among adventurers, they want to use this mission to climb the ranks. They plan on using their high stats in stealth and tracking to follow the targets without being detected. They figure that since the forest is 48th on the danger list, the mission could earn them a jump of at least 1,000 spots in the rankings, depending on how reliable the information is. Sensing the risk, Luke asks them not to do anything crazy over this, but Captain Owl reassures her, promising they won't fight since he has no intention of being reckless. The group decides to split up for now. Luke and Lo Tully will be responsible for taking the royal horn to a safe place since it would be too difficult to fight with the animal nearby. The main concern is that Dalcon Iris is after the cubs, which increases the risk of an ambush. Besides, our hero doesn't want the royal horn getting any more involved in the fight, especially after Luke noticed how terrified it was earlier because of them. The plan they agreed on is that as soon as they get the wolf to safety, they'll meet up under a tall tree. Someone will keep watch all night, just to be safe in case they need to help each other out. As they get ready to leave, Eddie continues teaching Lo Tully how to move through the forest. Aware that Dal and Iris might escape if they take too long, our hero lets the others go on ahead. But first, he asks Eddie to teach him a bit more about his strategy. Despite the rush, after a quick training session with the archer, Owl, whose sword was destroyed, borrows a dagger. Our hero then offers his hunting blade as payment for the lesson the mercenary gave him. Before they leave, they advise him to do some mental training before sleeping to increase his success rate, reviewing everything once a day. Now alone, Luke and Loy focus on getting the royal horn to a safe place while also resuming the ecological survey given by the system. Even though Dowson Iris is still a concern, they know they have a responsibility to finish the job. In a moment of mutual understanding, our protagonist expresses his confidence that Eddie and Owl will complete their objective, figuring they're even more capable than he is. Luke agrees, stating that their skills are impressive and that they're trustworthy people. Then, our protagonist gets an idea and suggests they look for the royal horn's home while they do their survey. He wonders where the animal came from all this time and brings up the possibility that there might be others like it at its home. If the place is safe, they could hide the cub right there. Luke agrees with the idea and says the easiest way to find the place is to simply ask the royal horn. She walks up to it, places her hand on the animal's head, and asks where it wants to go. Immediately, the royal horn starts running down a strange path in the forest, and the 2 of them follow it. They trust its instincts, knowing it's a smart animal that, despite being scared, was just a cub wanting to go home. During the chase, they come across another unidentified beast. Taking the opportunity, Lo starts documenting the creatures they find, like a green monkey and then a strange-looking moose. He keeps taking notes and sketching the various unknown animals that appear along the way. Eventually, they stop for another rest around a campfire. While our hero is meditating, feeling his prana spread out, Luke calls his name, breaking his concentration. He explained that he was just going over what Eddie had taught him. While Luke, still awake, checked the report he'd written. She commented that he wasn't very good at drawing and needed to improve that skill. She also said he needed to be more concise with his writing and approach things from a more objective point of view. Seeing her dedication, our hero asked why she was so determined to capture Rosso Cruel, and if it was a goal she had to achieve no matter what. The girl confirmed that she had no other choice but to follow through with her plan. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, our hero decided to help her. He understood that her staying up late was a result of extreme anxiety. He knew that if she just stood still, everything she was holding inside would explode. It was a feeling he knew all too well. Luke thought it was strange how naturally he talked about it. But then she realized it was for the same reason he trained late every day. She thanked him for his help, even though he still didn't know what her true goal was. Feeling that he could really help the appraiser, he listened intently as Luke finally decided to end the mystery and reveal everything. Luke started by explaining that normal rankings are lists that classify the best people from the top down. On those lists, everyone competes to climb higher and higher to gain honor and prove their worth. She brought up the exact opposite, a ranking that lists people from the bottom up. Basically, a ranking of the worst. And that dark side of the rankings was exactly what she was hunting. The story began 5 years ago. Luke had a very close friend named Mila, a girl who was blind from birth and had never seen the world with her own eyes. Maybe that's why she never laughed at Luke's dream. Instead, she'd say her friend was amazing and always ask if she really wanted to be an appraiser. Luke would answer with conviction that her dream was to become the best appraiser and break the record for the #1 spot on a ranking, because she believed there was no greater honor than recording the great figures of history. While the other kids said she would never make it, Mila was the only one who believed in her dream. One day, Mila said that school had become too small for someone like Luke. She then told her that her father had invited her on a trip on a cruise ship called Bond Solutions. Luke got super excited since it was a newly built luxury cruise ship. Mariella explained that her father got the invitation from a relative, and she didn't know many of the details. She thought about giving her ticket to Luke since the trip wouldn't be as much fun for her because she couldn't see, but Luke flat out refused, saying she would only go if Mila went with her. She held her friend's hand and promised she would guide her the whole time. So Mila agreed to ask her father. After their talk, Mila's mother gave up her ticket, and Luke was able to board the Bond Solutions. For Luke, who never fit in at school because her dreams were too big, Mila was her only friend, and the feeling was mutual for the blind girl. Mila's family was very grateful to Luke for her friendship. Then 2 days after they boarded the ship, tragedy struck. An engine problem caused the ship to run ground, and it quickly started sinking. The impact took out more than half the lifeboats, meaning it would take 3 trips to evacuate all the passengers. Facing this critical situation, the captain gathered everyone on deck. With no other choice, he took out a book to decide who would get on the lifeboats. In front of the entire crew, he began reading the list for the first group to be rescued, instructing them to board immediately as soon as their name was called. Luke held Mila's hand tightly, just as she had promised. Suddenly, the captain called Luke's name. After announcing several other names, he finished the list for the first lifeboat. The girl was in shock when she realized she'd been called alone without Mila. Her blind friend then let go of her hand and insisted she go on ahead. She said there was no time to argue and that maybe neither of them would survive. Mila said she believed Luke would become a great appraiser and that Luke needed to believe it too. Luke eventually gave in and got into one of the lifeboats. As soon as she reached the shore, Luke immediately returned to the ship, but when she got back, Mila was no longer there. By the third and final rescue trip, it was already too late. Luke saw the ship explode and devastated fell to her knees. Nearby, 2 crew members were talking, saying they lived righteous lives and that the people from the ranking of the worst had been left for last. Hearing that, Luke lost it and asked what ranking of the worst meant. Noticing from their reaction that it was something people weren't supposed to know, she demanded an explanation, threatening to tell everyone on the beach if they didn't talk. The 2 crew members decided to tell her on the condition that she wouldn't say anything to the captain. They explained that the ranking of the worst is a list that classifies people by their lowest capability. It groups together those who fall behind in social, economic, physical, or even mental areas. Luke commented that you can identify that kind of person just by looking at them. Our hero then understood that the list was used to decide who would be thrown away when things got tough. People with lives in their hands, like ship captains, hospital directors, and politicians, frequently used this system to decide which lives had priority. Luke's goal ever since then has been to erase the ranking of the worst from this world, because she will never forgive the system that took her best friend. In her view, a ranking that throws people into despair has no place in the world. Our hero, understanding the source of her determination, asked what all of this had to do with Rosso Cruel. Luke explained that she wanted to use one villain to take down another since the ranking of the worst is unofficial, just like the unregistered criminal ranking Roscruel is on. If they could capture him and demand answers about these hidden rankings, they could get closer to whoever is behind it all. That's why she wants to take down Rosso Cruel, no matter the cost. Our hero asked if she had any idea who the mastermind was. Luke replied that given the involvement of politicians and rich people, she believed it was a large organization, maybe a version of the Institute operating in the underworld, but she admitted that was just a guess. Recognizing the burden she had carried alone, he said it must have hurt a lot, and that even so, she never stopped. He called her an incredible girl, which made her shy. Then Luke started to cry and asked Lo Tully to tell his story too. Still emotional, Luke said she didn't want to cry alone and asked him to share his story as well. Our hero agreed, but told her he'd do it without crying. So around the campfire, he started telling her all about his past. The next morning, Luca Meldio was still in tears. She never imagined Lo had gone through something so difficult. She finally understood why he was in such a hurry to get to the island of the gods and save his people. Lo, for his part, admitted he'd learned from her that being impatient doesn't guarantee success. Realizing their connection had grown, he told her she could always count on him for anything and officially asked her to be his exclusive appraiser. Through her tears, she accepted, promising he wouldn't regret it, and they sealed the deal with a handshake. After walking for a good while, they started looking for the way back. During a break, our hero asked Luke what kind of areas royal horns usually lived in. She explained that they mostly lived in caves because they were hardy, didn't need to hunt, and preferred to stay quiet in their shelters. Suddenly, the royal horn guiding them seemed agitated by something and took off running. Realizing they were getting close to their objective, they didn't want to lose sight of the creature and ran right after it. The chase led them to a massive rock. Luke immediately noticed it wasn't an ordinary rock, but a Musa mimic, a very rare beast she didn't even know existed in the Azaban forest. However, the creature was already defeated, which explained a lot. She started to explain that while a common mimic lures humans with treasure before devouring them, the Musa mimic uses other beasts as bait. It keeps rare creatures inside its body to attract poachers living in symbiosis with them to devour the hunters together. Because it traveled with so many different kinds of beasts, it was also known as a walking museum. The royal horn must have been trapped inside it. When the Musa mimic,